Election denier. What a delightful phrase. It conjures up images of people so detached from reality that they could find Biden's speeches intelligible. But here we are, in the current reality, where the very concept of questioning the election's outcome is treated as heresy. Yet, strangely, the same people who scream about denying reality spent 4 years convinced that Donald Trump was installed by Putin as his prattling pinko puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line.
The mainstream media beat the Russian collusion drum so hard it's a wonder they didn't deafen themselves in their echo chamber. And yet, after millions were surreptitiously spent on infinitesimally idiotic investigations like Mueller's, there was no concrete evidence of the Trump-Putin coordination. The so-called collusion ended up as one of Washington's most garishly expensive wild goose chases. And when the ham-fisted hoax was finally unraveled, did anybody apologize? Of course not. The narrative was simply forgotten. Reality, as they say, was as rewritten as Tim Walz's service record. In the 2020 election, we were treated to the digital dirt deposit that was the Hunter Biden laptop, which of course could only be the misanthropic machinations of the Moscow maestro himself, Vladimir Putin. After all, no serious person would ever believe that a man as honorable and highly esteemed as Joe Biden would ever be caught shaking down foreign governments and collecting more bribes than the former Malaysian Prime Minister. At least until the cascade of corroborating evidence came out with all the grace of cackling Kamala at an open bar.
And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just a more woke than less woke.
Yeah. Thanks to Hunter's quest to record every raunchy rendezvous and back-alley blackmail for Biden family posterity, perhaps precluding Navy Joan, the American news cycle was treated to titillating tales so depraved it would make Harvey Weinstein blush. Yet, spinning harder than Baryshnikov on Bolivian marching powder, the media again presented this as, say it with me, Russian disinformation. 51 former intelligence officials called commie conspiracy, despite the real contents later being verified by the FBI. And all the while, Facebook and Twitter made sure that the story saw about as much daylight as the crew of a nuclear submarine, right before the election. I mean, clearly, checks with loan repayment being written in the memo being traded around the family like baseball cards, the mysterious H holding 10 for the big guy, and the Burisma bonanza only serve as evidence of the humanitarian work that the Biden family has been doing throughout the world, making the world a brighter and better place, one dubious deal at a time. This brings me to the next part in our comedy of errors that was the 2020 election. With all the safety and security of a rising star at Diddy's house, mail-in ballots came fluttering onto the scene like confetti for a parade that nobody asked for. The mainstream media Mensheviks sang from the rooftops that democracy itself was on the ballot. Because, as we all know, democracy is best served through the USPS. The notion that Bill Barr brought to the forefront, only to later recant, claiming that mail-in ballots have the potential for fraud or could undermine the electoral process, were clearly misplaced. Thus, when the blue line of the election results graph took a sharper left turn than the plot line of the crying game, the truth became clear. Mail-in voters, much like the dead, exclusively vote Democrat. Nothing more to see here. To say that there was any election interference is as unhinged as claiming that the Democratic legal apparatus pursuing Trump with a perpetual plethora of lawsuits directly before an election was politically motivated and personal. Here's a thought experiment. If we didn't have an unbiased legal system, why would courts be willing to entertain lawsuits against Trump and not those for Trump? Letitia James showed us that in a court of law, when you've got the right judge, the absence of evidence can magically transform into a compelling case. Thanks, of course, to the preponderance of, well, nothing much at all. As Joseph Stalin once said, "Give me the man and I will give you the case against him." Every judge could clearly see that Trump was guilty before seeing the particulars of the case. Yet, now we face a peculiar scenario where the New York Supreme Court might just nullify a $450 million verdict because, absurdly, there's no one stepping up as the victim. In what universe does justice require an actual person to be wronged? Certainly not ours, where the interpretation of law can be as abstract as modern art. I mean, why should a case hinge on witnesses and actual damages, rather than arbitrary rules subject to the interpretation on subject matter that has never been contested by the contract signatories? Being a lender myself, and knowing how commercial loans are made, I find the legal system's current antics to be the pinnacle of lunacy. And let's be clear, This myriad of governmental lawsuits is not about tampering with the elections. No, this judicial activism is more about the courageous pursuit of Stalin's doctrine, where justice is served those deemed deserving by those in political power. So, do I believe that the last election was a fair election? Let's put it this way. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, and I should get my head examined. I mean, let's be real here. They're flying in illegal immigrants faster than Usain Bolt running with the Bulls.
The program allows up to 30,000 asylum seekers every month to be flown to the U.S. from 4 countries: Venezuela, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Cuba. Fox's Bill Malugin reports.
For the very first time, internal DHS data reveals the U.S. cities that hundreds of thousands of Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelan migrants have flown into via a controversial mass parole program created by the Biden administration.
And why, you ask? Because their addition to the population is counted in terms of House seats and representation in Congress. And there, my friends, lies the real threat. The lawsuits and continued narrative of Trump being a Russian asset and a threat to democracy is a grand distraction. The shiny object, while the real sleight of hand happens with voter demographics. It's the art of the deal, where the deal is, hey, look over there while we redraw the map. The democratically unelected and newly anointed Kamala Harris, whose primary votes could be counted on the fingers of a retired incompetent bomb disposal expert, is now touted as the deity of democracy. Perplexingly, after she was deemed the only politician less favorable than Biden. Now, the media meticulously molds the perception of Kamala Harris into a joyous warrior fighting for the very soul of America, when in fact, she represents a rehash of the political puppet show that we've been watching in horror for years. As I lie awake at night pondering if I could see myself voting for Comrade Kamala, I'm reminded of deep words of wisdom I heard her say not long ago.
Don't.
As President Biden said, just don't.
Exactly. One word. Pretty straightforward.